Marcus Chen never expected his routine cargo run to the Kepler 442 system would end with him plummeting through the atmosphere of an uncharted planet. The warning lights on his transport ship's console flashed red as the hull groaned under atmospheric pressure it wasn't designed to handle. His navigation computer had malfunctioned 3 jumps back, and now he was paying the price. The planet below looked deceptively peaceful, covered in vast forests and crystalline lakes that sparkled like diamonds. Marcus gripped the controls as his ship screamed through clouds that tasted of ozone and something floral. The emergency landing protocol kicked in, but Marcus knew it wouldn't be enough. His ship was too damaged, falling too fast. The impact sent shockwaves through the forest floor. Ancient trees, taller than Earth's redwoods, cracked and fell as Marcus's transport carved a smoking trench through the wilderness. When the grinding metal finally stopped, an eerie silence settled over the crash site. Steam hissed from ruptured coolant lines and the acrid smell of burned electronics filled the air. Marcus crawled from the wreckage, his body aching but miraculously intact. His survival suit had protected him from the worst of it, though the left arm hung uselessly at his side. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead as he surveyed the destruction. His ship was beyond repair, twisted metal and scattered components telling the story of his violent arrival. He activated his emergency beacon, knowing it was probably futile. He was so far off course that rescue might never come. The planet's air was breathable according to his suit's readings, though it carried unfamiliar scents that made his nose twitch. Something like cinnamon mixed with copper and wildflowers. As Marcus gathered what supplies he could salvage, movement in the tree line caught his attention. Figures emerged from the shadows, moving with predatory grace. At first glance, they looked almost human, but as they approached, Marcus realized how wrong that assumption was. They were female in form, but their ears pointed upward like a fox's, twitching at every sound. Russet and silver fur covered their arms and legs, while their eyes glowed with an inner light that seemed to pierce right through him. They wore form-fitting combat armor that looked both advanced and organic, as if grown rather than manufactured. The lead figure stepped forward, her fur a striking silver white that caught the alien sunlight. She spoke in a language that sounded like musical chimes mixed with growls. When Marcus didn't respond, she tilted her head, those luminous eyes studying him with predatory intelligence. Marcus raised his hand slowly, the universal gesture of peace. The fox girl's nose twitched as she scented the air around him. Her expression shifted from wariness to something that might have been confusion. She spoke again, this time in accented but recognizable galactic standard. "What manner of creature are you? You smell of iron and fear, but also of something else, something protective." Marcus found his voice. "I'm human. My ship crashed. I mean no harm." The fox girl's ears flattened against her skull. "Human. The legends speak of humans, but they are myths. Stories told to cubs." She circled him like a predator sizing up prey. "Yet you stand here bleeding and broken, and my instincts scream at me that you are dangerous." "Why?" Before Marcus could answer, one of the younger fox girls spoke up. Her fur was a vibrant red-orange, and she couldn't have been more than 16 by human standards. "Den Mother Kira has sent. It's strange, like the old stories say. Like a protector father." Kira's eyes narrowed. "Impossible. The protector fathers died out centuries ago." But even as she said it, Marcus noticed her posture changing. The aggressive stance softened slightly, and her tail, which had been rigid with tension, began to swish with what looked like uncertainty. Marcus felt something shift in the air around them. The other fox girls were backing away, but not in fear. It was more like they were giving space to something significant. Kira stepped closer, her nostrils flaring as she took in his scent again. "The Academy," she said finally, her voice carrying a weight Marcus didn't understand. "You will come with us to the Academy. The Elder Council must see this for themselves." Marcus had little choice but to agree. His ship was destroyed. His beacon might never be answered, and these fox girls were his only chance of survival on this strange world. As they led him deeper into the forest, he caught glimpses of structures in the distance, towers that spiraled up through the canopy like living things. The Academy of the Lupine Claws emerged from the forest like something out of a dream. Massive trees had been shaped and grown into buildings, their bark forming walls while their branches created graceful arches and walkways. Young fox girls moved through the complex with fluid grace, some carrying weapons that hummed with energy, others practicing combat forms that looked more like deadly dances. They all stopped to stare as Marcus passed. Some approached cautiously, their noses twitching as they caught his scent. Others backed away, their ears flat against their skulls. The reaction was universal, though, a recognition of something they'd never encountered but somehow remembered. Kira led him to a central building that towered above the others, its trunk wide enough to house a small city. Inside, bioluminescent fungi provided a soft, pulsing light that made the walls seem alive. They climbed a spiraling ramp that followed the tree's natural growth, passing levels filled with training rooms, laboratories, and living quarters. At the top, they entered a chamber where 3 ancient fox girls waited. Their fur was white with age, their eyes clouded but still sharp with intelligence. The one in the center rose from her seat, a throne grown from the living wood of the tree itself. "So," she said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries, "a human comes to us at last. And not just any human, but one who carries the old scent, the scent that calls to our deepest instincts." She studied Marcus with those ancient eyes. "Tell me, young human, do you know what you are?" Marcus shook his head, confusion clear on his face. "I'm just a cargo pilot. I don't understand any of this." The elder smiled, revealing teeth that were still sharp despite her age. "No, child. You are much more than that. You are what we have been waiting for, what we have been training for generation after generation." She gestured to the fox girls around them. "These are the finest warriors in 100 systems, but they lack something crucial. Something only you can provide." Kira stepped forward. "Elder Yuki, surely you don't mean—" "I do." The elder's gaze never left Marcus. "He will stay. He will learn our ways, and we will learn from him. It is time for the Academy to have its first den father in 300 years. Marcus spent his first week at the Academy in a state of constant bewilderment. The fox girls, who called themselves the Vulpine, treated him with a mixture of reverence and suspicion that made no sense to him. They'd given him quarters in the upper levels of the great tree, rooms that felt more like a luxury suite than a prison cell. Kira had been assigned as his guide, though Marcus suspected she was more of a guard. She watched him constantly with those predatory eyes, her silver tail twitching whenever he moved too quickly or made unexpected sounds. Despite her wariness, she answered his questions with surprising patience. "Your people?" Marcus asked one morning as they walked through the training grounds. "What happened to these den fathers you keep mentioning?" Kira's ears drooped slightly. "They were not our people exactly. They were yours, humans like you." She paused at the edge of a sparring circle where young Vulpine practiced with energy blades. Long ago, when the first colonies were established, humans and Vulpine worked together. The humans provided protection, guidance. They helped our warriors focus their aggressive instincts into disciplined strength. Marcus watched as 2 fox girls circled each other, their movements fluid and deadly. One, barely adult by human standards, moved with the grace of a professional fighter. But something was off. Her strikes, while technically perfect, lacked control. Passion overrode precision. What happened to change that? "War," Kira said simply. "The hegemony wars 3 centuries ago. The humans were called away to fight, promised they would return. They never did. Most died in the battles. The few survivors scattered across the galaxy." Her voice carried old pain. "We've been waiting ever since." As they continued their tour, Marcus began to understand the depth of the problem. The Academy trained some of the most formidable warriors he'd ever seen. The Vulpine were naturally stronger and faster than humans, with reflexes that bordered on supernatural. Their combat techniques had been refined over centuries into something approaching art, but they lacked discipline. Without the stabilizing influence of den fathers, their instincts often overrode their training. Marcus witnessed sparring matches that turned into real fights, saw promising students wash out because they couldn't control their aggressive impulses. The Academy was producing brilliant individual fighters, but not soldiers. "They respond to you differently," Kira observed that evening as they sat in the communal dining hall, the younglings especially. "Have you noticed?" Marcus had noticed. Whenever he entered a room, the youngest fox girls would quiet down. Their posture would change, becoming more attentive, more focused. It was subtle but unmistakable. "I don't understand why, though. I'm not particularly impressive." Kira's nose twitched and she leaned closer. "It's your scent. To us you smell like safety, like home." She seemed embarrassed by the admission. "Our instincts recognize you as a protector. even if our minds struggle to accept it. The proof came 3 days later during a training exercise. Marcus was observing a group of adolescent Vulpine practicing squad tactics when things went wrong. What started as a simple drill escalated into a vicious brawl between two rival cliques. Energy weapons hummed to life, and Marcus saw real killing intent in their glowing eyes. Without thinking, Marcus stepped into the center of the melee. "Enough," he shouted, his voice carrying an authority he didn't know he possessed. The effect was immediate and startling. Every fox girl in the courtyard froze, their weapons lowering as they turned to look at him. The two who had been about to tear each other apart stepped back, their ears flat against their skulls in what Marcus was learning to recognize as submission. "You're supposed to be training together, not trying to kill each other," Marcus continued, his tone firm but not angry. "What's the point of all this skill if you can't work as a team?" One of the older students, her fur a deep auburn, stepped forward. "But Denfather, Senna said that my combat form was weak, that I rely too much on brute force." "And maybe she's right," Marcus said, surprised at how naturally the title had slipped past. "But is fighting her going to make you a better warrior? Or would listening to her criticism and working to improve serve you better?" The fox girl's ears twitched as she considered this. Around the courtyard, other students nodded slowly. Marcus could see the logic taking hold, their pack instincts responding to his guidance in ways that their instructor's commands never could. Elder Yuki appeared at his shoulder like a ghost. "You see," she said quietly, "this is what we have been missing. Not just strength or knowledge, but the ability to channel our nature into something greater than the sum of its parts." Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself drawn deeper into the Academy's operations. He began sitting in on strategy classes, where his human perspective offered insights that the Vulpine instructors had never considered. Their combat doctrine was based on individual excellence and small unit tactics, but Marcus saw possibilities for larger formations, coordinated attacks that could utilize their natural abilities on a strategic scale. The students responded to his presence with an enthusiasm that bordered on worship. Where before they had been independent and often rebellious, they now sought his approval with touching eagerness. Marcus found himself mediating disputes, offering tactical advice, and even helping with personal problems that the fox girls brought to him. "You're changing them," Kira observed one evening. She'd been warming up to him gradually, her initial suspicion giving way to something that might have been affection, not just their fighting but their entire approach to life. Marcus watched a group of young Vulpine practicing night exercises below them. Where once they would have competed fiercely against each other, they now moved as a coordinated unit. Their natural aggression had been channeled into protective instincts for their squad mates. "I'm not doing anything special," Marcus protested. "I'm just treating them like the intelligent beings they are instead of wild animals to be tamed." "That's what makes you perfect for this role," Elder Yuki said, joining them on the observation deck. "You don't see them as lesser beings or tools of war. You see them as individuals who happen to be warriors." She studied him with those ancient eyes. "But there is something you must understand, young Denfather. Your influence over them is growing stronger each day. Soon they will follow you anywhere, do anything you ask. That is a power that could reshape this world." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "I never asked for that kind of responsibility." "No," the elder agreed. "But it is yours nonetheless. The question is, what will you do with it?" As if to emphasize her point, a young fox girl approached them. She couldn't have been more than 14, with bright orange fur and eyes that sparkled with intelligence. "Denfather Marcus," she said, her voice carrying the formal tone they all used when addressing him. "I've been working on the tactical problem you assigned. I think I found a solution." Marcus knelt down to her level, giving her his full attention. As she excitedly explained her reasoning, he caught sight of the other students watching from nearby. Their expressions were rapt, hanging on every word of the exchange. In their eyes he saw something that both thrilled and terrified him. They didn't just respect him. They were beginning to love him with the fierce, protective devotion that only a pack could feel for their leader. And as that realization sank in, Marcus understood that his role at the Academy was about to become far more complicated than he'd ever imagined. The attack came without warning on a crisp morning when the twin suns painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Marcus was reviewing tactical formations with a group of senior students, when the alarm crystals throughout the academy began to pulse with urgent red light. The sound they made was like nothing he'd heard before, a harmony that seemed to resonate in his bones. "Raid alarm," Kira said, her entire body going rigid with battle readiness. But that's impossible. No one has dared attack the academy in over 50 years. Through the great windows of the strategy room, Marcus could see ships descending through the atmosphere. They were sleek, predatory things that moved with an organic grace that suggested biotechnology rather than standard engineering. As they drew closer, he could make out their markings, the crimson skull and crossbones of the Crimson Maw pirates. How many? Elder Yuki's voice cut through the chaos as she appeared in the doorway, her ancient face grim with determination. 12 ships, reported Senna, the auburn-furred student who had become one of Marcus's most trusted pupils. Mixed corvettes and fighters. They're not responding to our hails. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Why would pirates attack a combat school? That's suicide. Not if they know what they're looking for, Kira said, her eyes fixed on him with sudden understanding. Word has spread through the galaxy that a human has appeared at the academy. A genuine den father. Do you have any idea what some people would pay for that kind of prize? The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. He wasn't just a curiosity or an oddity. He was a weapon that could command absolute loyalty from one of the galaxy's most feared warrior races. In the wrong hands, that power could destabilize entire sectors. They're jamming our communications, another student reported, her voice tight with barely controlled fear. We can't call for reinforcement. Elder Yuki turned to Marcus, her ancient eyes burning with fierce determination. This is your first real test, Den Father. Will you run and hide while your pack fights? Or will you lead them into battle? Marcus felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon him. The fox girls in the room had gone completely still, waiting for his decision. He could see the trust in their faces, the absolute faith that he would know what to do. The responsibility was crushing. What are our defensive capabilities? He asked, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. The academy itself is heavily shielded, Kira replied, slipping into her role as his lieutenant with natural ease. But if they establish a beachhead, they can bring in heavier weapons. We need to stop them before they land. Marcus nodded, his mind racing through possibilities. The Vulpine were incredible individual fighters, but their traditional tactics relied on small unit operations. Against 12 ships with potentially hundreds of pirates, they needed something different. How many combat-ready students do we have? 347, Senna answered immediately, plus 73 instructors and support staff. Marcus turned to study the tactical display, watching as the enemy ships spread out into an attack formation. They were good, he had to admit, professional, but they were also predictable, following standard pirate doctrine that emphasized overwhelming force and intimidation. They expect us to hunker down and wait for rescue, he said, the beginnings of a plan forming in his mind. Instead, we're going to hit them hard and fast before they can establish orbital superiority. With what? Kira asked. We have training fighters, not warships. We have something better, Marcus replied, feeling a grim smile cross his face. We have Vulpine warriors who fight like demons when they're protecting their home. And now they have someone to coordinate them. The next hour was a whirlwind of preparation. Marcus found himself at the center of a storm of activity, issuing orders with an authority that felt both natural and terrifying. The Fox girls responded to his commands with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural, their pack instincts allowing them to coordinate in ways that would have been impossible for human forces. He divided the available fighters into 3 squadrons, each with a specific role in his battle plan. The first would engage the enemy ships directly, using their superior maneuverability to keep the pirates busy. The second would target the ship's engines and weapon systems, crippling them for the final phase. The third, led by Kira herself, would board the disabled vessels and eliminate the crews. It's risky, Elder Yuki warned as they prepared to launch. If you're wrong about their capabilities, we could lose everything. If we do nothing, we definitely lose everything, Marcus replied, including our freedom. The launch itself was breathtaking. 300 Vulpine warriors poured from the Academy's hidden hangars and fighters that moved like living things. Marcus watched from the command center as they formed up around his own ship, a modified trainer that Kira had insisted he pilot personally. Remember, he broadcast on the tactical channel, we're not trying to destroy them all. We're trying to show them that attacking the academy costs more than they're willing to pay. The engagement began badly. The pirates had superior firepower and better ships, and for the first few minutes it looked like Marcus's plan was going to be a disaster. 3 Vulpine fighters were destroyed in the opening exchange. Their pilots lost before they could even engage the enemy. But then the Fox girls' natural instincts began to assert themselves. They stopped trying to fight like conventional pilots and started fighting like the predators they were. They used their ship's agility to dart in and out of the enemy formation, striking at weak points and vanishing before the pirates could respond. Marcus found himself in the thick of the battle, his fighter dancing between enemy fire as he coordinated the attack. The sensation was indescribable, like being part of a vast organism where every cell knew its role instinctively. The Vulpine pilots responded to his directions before he even finished giving them, their pack instincts allowing them to anticipate his strategy. The turning point came when Kira's boarding teams reached their targets. The pirates had never faced Vulpine warriors in close combat before, and the shock of encountering enemies who could tear through bulkheads with their bare claws was devastating. One by one, the pirate ships went dark as their crews were overwhelmed. "This is Captain Thorne of the Crimson Maw," a voice crackled over the communications channel. "We surrender. Repeat, we surrender." Marcus felt a surge of triumph, but he kept his voice steady as he responded. "Your ships will be impounded and your crews imprisoned pending trial. Any attempt to resist will be met with lethal force." The aftermath was sobering. They had won, but at a cost. 7 pilots had been lost, and the academy itself had suffered damage from the initial bombardment. As Marcus walked through the memorial garden where the fallen would be honored, he felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders like a lead cloak. "You did well," Elder Yuki said, joining him among the flowering trees. "Better than I dared hope for a first battle." 7 good people died because I put them in harm's way," Marcus replied, his voice heavy with guilt. 7 good people died protecting their home and their pack," the elder corrected gently. "That is a death with honor. And because of your leadership, hundreds more will live to see another day." Kira appeared at his other side, her silver fur marked with the burns and scratches of battle. "The interrogations are complete," she reported. "The pirates were hired by someone calling himself the Collector. He's offering 10 million credits for you, alive and unharmed." Marcus felt his blood run cold. 10 million? That's enough to buy a small fleet, or to start a war, Elder Yuki said grimly. "Word of today's battle will spread. Others will come, and they may not be as poorly prepared as these pirates were." As they stood in the garden, surrounded by the living memorial to the Academy's fallen, Marcus realized that his life had irrevocably changed. He was no longer just a stranded pilot hoping for rescue. He was a leader, a symbol, and a target. The Fox girls around him would follow him into hell itself if he asked them to. The question was, would he be worthy of that devotion when the real tests came? In the weeks following the pirate attack, Marcus noticed changes in himself that went beyond the obvious ones. His reflexes had sharpened, his senses had grown more acute, and he found himself understanding the Vulpine body language and vocal cues with an intuition that surprised him. But the most significant change was emotional. He was beginning to feel protective of the Fox girls in a way that went beyond duty or friendship. When young Piper, barely 16 with bright orange fur, came to him with tears in her eyes because she'd failed a tactical exam, Marcus felt a surge of paternal fury at whoever had made her cry. When veteran instructor Vera was injured during a training exercise, he found himself pacing her medical bay like an anxious father. "It's the bond," Elder Yuki explained one evening as they walked through the Academy's memorial grove. "The same instincts that make them see you as a den father are making you see them as your pack. It's biological, written into both your species over millions of years of parallel evolution." Marcus paused beside a flowering tree whose bioluminescent blooms cast soft blue light across the pathway. Parallel evolution? But humans and Vulpine developed on different worlds, did they? The elder's eyes glinted with ancient secrets. "That's a story for another time. What matters now is that you understand what's happening to you. The protective instincts will only grow stronger. Soon, the thought of any harm coming to them will be physically painful for you." As if to prove her point, Marcus's attention was drawn to a commotion near the training grounds. A group of senior students had surrounded Kira, their postures aggressive and challenging. Marcus felt his heart rate spike and his hands clench into fists before he even understood what was happening. The den father shows favoritism, one of them was saying, her voice carrying across the courtyard. Kira gets special privileges because she's his guard. That's not true, Kira replied, but Marcus could hear the strain in her voice. Her silver tail was rigid with tension, and her ears lay flat against her skull. Marcus found himself moving toward the confrontation without conscious thought. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had become second nature. The challenging students immediately backed down, their aggressive postures melting into submission. "No, Den Father," their leader mumbled, unable to meet his eyes. "We were just discussing training assignments." "Good," Marcus said mildly. "I trust you'll remember that we're all on the same side here." The students dispersed quickly, leaving him alone with Kira. "Thank you," she said quietly. But Marcus could see the hurt in her luminous eyes. "They're not wrong, though. You do give me responsibilities that others might deserve more." Marcus studied her carefully. Over the months since his arrival, Kira had become more than just his guide and guard. She was his closest advisor, the one person who could challenge his decisions without triggering his protective instincts. But he was beginning to realize that their relationship was complicated in ways that went beyond professional duty. "You earned those responsibilities," he said firmly. "You were the first to trust me, the first to see me as something other than a curiosity or a threat. That matters." Kira's ears perked up slightly, and Marcus caught a subtle change in her scent that his enhanced senses could now detect. It was something warm and pleased, mixed with an undertone he couldn't quite identify. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a messenger, a young fox girl with midnight black fur who moved with the fluid grace of a trained scout. "Den Father," she said, offering a formal bow, "Elder Yuki requests your immediate presence in the council chamber. We have visitors." The visitors turned out to be a delegation from the Galactic Defense Council, the military arm of the Human Colonial Authority. 3 officers in crisp uniforms stood at attention in the great chamber, their faces carefully neutral as they surveyed the assembled Vulpine leaders. "Colonel Marcus Chen," the lead officer said, consulting a datapad. "You've been listed as missing and presumed dead for 4 months. The authority is pleased to discover you're alive and well." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "I'm not a colonel. I'm a civilian cargo pilot." "Not anymore," the officer replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Your unique situation has come to the attention of certain parties within the government. Congratulations on your field promotion." Elder Yuki stepped forward, her ancient face set in lines of stone. "The Den Father is under the protection of the Academy. He is not subject to your authority here." "With respect, Elder," the officer said, his tone suggesting no respect whatsoever. "Colonel Chen is a human citizen and a newly commissioned officer in the Colonial Defense Force. His duty is to humanity, not to a pack of alien warriors." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Every Vulpine present went completely still, their predatory instincts triggered by the casual dismissal. Marcus could practically taste the violence in the air. "I think you misunderstand the situation," Marcus said carefully, stepping between the humans and the increasingly agitated fox girls. "I'm not going anywhere. Colonel, you don't have a choice in the matter. The Strategic Command has plans for you and your unusual abilities. There's a war brewing in the Outer Rim, and we need someone who can command absolute loyalty from elite warriors." Marcus felt something cold and angry settle in his chest. "You want to use the Vulpine as shock troops." "We want to use every available resource to protect human colonies from the hegemony," the officer corrected. "The Vulpine are known throughout the galaxy as unparalleled fighters. With you leading them, they could be the decisive factor in the coming conflict." "No." The word came out flat and final, carrying an authority that made the human officer step back involuntarily. "Colonel, you're refusing a direct order from Strategic Command." "I'm refusing to lead my pack into a war that isn't theirs to fight," Marcus replied. Around him he could feel the Vulpine relaxing slightly, their trust in him deepening with every word. The standoff might have continued indefinitely, but it was broken by an unexpected voice. "Perhaps there's a compromise to be found," Kira said, stepping forward with diplomatic grace. "The Academy has always been willing to provide training and tactical consultation to Allied forces. We could offer our expertise without compromising our independence. The lead officer's eyes sharpened with interest. What kind of consultation? Advanced combat techniques, small unit tactics, infiltration and sabotage operations, Kira continued smoothly. The Vulpine have knowledge that could be invaluable to human forces, and we'd be willing to share it under the right circumstances. Marcus watched the negotiation unfold with growing admiration for Kira's diplomatic skills. She was offering just enough to make the humans feel they were getting something valuable while protecting the Academy's autonomy. It was a masterful performance. We'd need to send a team of observers, the officer said finally, to evaluate the effectiveness of your training methods. Acceptable, Elder Yuki said, speaking for the first time since the initial confrontation. But they will observe only. No interference with Academy operations and no attempts to recruit our students. As the humans departed with their face-saving compromise, Marcus found himself alone with Kira on the chamber's observation deck. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. That was brilliantly done, he said, genuinely impressed by her handling of the situation. I learned from watching you, she replied, moving to stand beside him at the railing. You showed me that sometimes the best way to win is to make sure everyone feels like they got something they wanted. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the Academy's students move through the courtyards below. Marcus found himself studying Kira's profile in the fading light, noting the way her silver fur caught the sunset and the graceful line of her neck. Marcus, she said softly, using his first name for the first time since they'd met. What they said about duty to your own species. Do you ever think about going back to human space? The question hit him harder than he'd expected. Sometimes, he admitted. I wonder what I'm missing, what I've given up by staying here. And what conclusion do you reach? Marcus turned to look at her fully, taking in the concern in her luminous eyes, the way her ears drooped slightly with worry. That home isn't a place, he said quietly. It's the people who matter to you. And all the people who matter to me are right here. Kira's tail began to swish, and what Marcus had learned was a sign of contentment. Good, she said, and there was something in her voice that made his heart skip a beat. Because we're not done needing you yet. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Marcus realized that his feelings for Kira had evolved far beyond those of a commander for a trusted subordinate. But admitting that to himself opened up a whole new set of complications that he wasn't sure he was ready to face. The human observers arrived 3 weeks later, a team of military analysts and xenobiologists who set up their equipment with clinical efficiency. Marcus watched them work with growing unease, noting how they treated the Vulpine students like interesting specimens rather than sentient beings. They're cataloging our capabilities, Kira observed, joining him on the observation deck overlooking the main training ground, measuring reaction times, analyzing combat patterns, studying our biology. It's what I expected, Marcus replied, but his jaw was tight with suppressed anger. They see you as weapons to be evaluated, not people to be respected. Below them, Dr. Sarah Chen, the team's xenobiologist, was conducting interviews with volunteer students. Marcus could see the fox girls' discomfort in their body language, the way their ears lay flat and their tails remained rigidly still. They were answering questions out of respect for his wishes, but clearly found the experience unpleasant. Den father, young Piper approached hesitantly, her orange fur dulled with distress. The human doctor wants to take blood samples. She says it's for genetic compatibility studies. I don't want to, but she insists it's required. Marcus felt his protective instincts flare like a supernova. She wants to do what? His voice carried a dangerous edge that made nearby students look up in alarm. She said something about understanding our enhanced physiology for military applications, Piper continued, shrinking back slightly from his intensity. But it feels wrong, Den father, like she wants to take something from us. Marcus's hands clenched into fists as he strode toward the research station. Kira fell into step beside him, her own anger evident in the rigid set of her shoulders. They found Dr. Chen preparing a genetic sampling kit, her movements brisk and professional. Dr. Chen, Marcus said, his tone deceptively calm. I understand you want blood samples from my students. Ah, Colonel Chen, she replied without looking up. Yes, the genetic analysis is crucial for understanding how human-Vulpine cooperation might be optimized. We need to map their enhanced reflexes, their improved sensory capabilities, their pack bonding mechanisms. And you didn't think to ask my permission first? Dr. Chen finally looked up, her expression showing mild surprise. These are just routine biological samples. Standard procedure for any xenobiological study. These aren't specimens, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a growl that would have done credit to any vulpine. They're sentient beings under my protection. You will not take anything from them without explicit consent from both them and me. Colonel, you're being unreasonable. The Strategic Command has authorized this research. I don't care what Strategic Command authorized, Marcus snapped. This is my academy, these are my people, and you'll respect their rights or you'll leave. Immediately. The confrontation had drawn a crowd. Students and instructors gathered in a loose circle, their predatory instincts responding to the tension in the air. Marcus could feel their support like a physical force at his back, their absolute trust in his judgment. Dr. Chen looked around at the assembled vulpine and seemed to realize for the first time that she was surrounded by apex predators who viewed her as a threat to their pack leader. I'll need to report this to my superiors, she said stiffly. You do that, Marcus replied. And while you're at it, tell them that any future research will be conducted on academy terms or not at all. As the human team packed up their equipment with obvious reluctance, Marcus found himself dealing with an unexpected consequence of his stand. The students' devotion to him had intensified to an almost worrying degree. They followed his every movement with adoring eyes, hanging on his words as if they were divine pronouncements. You need to be careful, Elder Yuki warned him that evening. The bond between you and the students is becoming dangerously strong. Some of them would die for you without hesitation. Is that such a bad thing? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. It is if you're not prepared for the responsibility that comes with it, the elder replied. A den father's influence over his pack is absolute. They will follow you into any danger, make any sacrifice you ask of them. That kind of power can corrupt even the best intentions. The truth of her words became apparent the next day when Marcus discovered that 3 of his youngest students had attempted to sneak out of the academy to hunt down Dr. Chen's shuttle. They'd been caught before they could leave the grounds, but their intent had been clear. She threatened you, Zara, the ringleader, explained with the earnest intensity of youth. We couldn't let that stand. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he looked into her fierce golden eyes. There was no doubt in her expression, no questioning of her decision. She would have killed a human being simply because that human had disrespected him. Zara, he said gently, kneeling down to her level. Dr. Chen wasn't a threat to me. She was just doing her job, even if she was doing it badly. But she made you angry, Zara protested. She tried to hurt the pack, and I dealt with it appropriately. That's my job as den father, not yours. Marcus studied her face carefully. Can you understand the difference? Zara's ears drooped as she processed his words. Yes, den father. I acted without thinking, without trusting, Marcus corrected. You didn't trust me to handle the situation, so you tried to handle it yourself. But that's not how a pack works. We trust each other to do our jobs. As he walked away from the disciplinary meeting, Marcus found Kira waiting for him in the corridor. Her expression was troubled and her silver tail swished with agitation. They're not the only ones, she said quietly. There are at least a dozen students who've been making similar plans. The younger ones especially see any challenge to your authority as a personal attack. Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of leadership pressing down on him like a physical force. How do I fix this? You don't, Kira replied. This is what we are, Marcus. What we've always been, loyal to the point of self-destruction when it comes to protecting our pack. She moved closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The question is whether you can accept that level of devotion. That night, Marcus found himself unable to sleep. He walked the academy's corridors, checking on the students in their dormitories, making sure the security systems were functioning properly. It was a ritual that had become second nature, but tonight it felt different. In the youngest student's dormitory, he paused at Piper's bedside. The orange-furred girl was curled up in a nest of blankets, her breathing deep and peaceful. On her nightstand sat a small carving of a human figure that Marcus recognized as himself. She'd made it in art class, pouring hours of careful work into every detail. Moving on, he found similar tokens throughout the dormitory. Drawings, sculptures, even a few poems written in the flowing script of the vulpine language, all of them depicting him in various heroic poses, all of them created with the loving devotion of children for a beloved parent. He was studying a particularly elaborate drawing when he became aware of someone watching him. Kira stood in the doorway, her silver fur gleaming in the soft light from the corridor. "They love you," she said simply. "Not just as a leader or a protector, but as a father. That's something that can't be taught or commanded. It simply is." Marcus set the drawing back on its owner's nightstand with careful reverence. "I never had children of my own," he said quietly. "I never understood what that kind of responsibility felt like." "And now you have 347 of them," Kira replied, moving to stand beside him. "All willing to follow you anywhere, trust you completely, die for you if necessary." They walked together toward the older students' quarters, their footsteps silent on the living wood floors. As they passed through a moonbeam streaming through one of the great windows, Marcus caught Kira's scent more clearly than usual. There was something different about it tonight, something that made his enhanced senses sharpen with interest. "Kira," he said, stopping suddenly, "are you all right? You smell different." Her ears flattened against her skull and she looked away with what appeared to be embarrassment. "It's nothing, just biological changes. They happen sometimes when a vulpine spends too much time around their den father." Marcus felt his heart rate spike as the implications hit him. "What kind of changes?" "The kind that make it clear that my feelings for you have evolved beyond professional respect," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "The kind that make me want things I shouldn't want from someone who sees me as a subordinate." The confession hung in the air between them like a challenge. Marcus studied her face in the moonlight, taking in the vulnerability in her luminous eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly with nervous energy. "Kira," he said softly, reaching out to touch her cheek. "You're not just a subordinate to me. You haven't been for a long time." She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing with relief. "I was afraid you'd say the relationship was inappropriate, that it would compromise your leadership." "Maybe it would," Marcus admitted, "but I've learned that some things are worth the risk." As they stood together in the moonlit corridor, surrounded by the sleeping forms of their pack, the war came to them 6 months later, not as a distant threat but as a reality that descended from the stars with the fury of a solar storm. Marcus woke to sirens wailing through the Academy's bioluminescent corridors and the urgent pulse of combat alerts echoing from the command center. "Report," he ordered as he burst into the tactical room, still pulling on his armor. The sight that greeted him on the holographic display made his blood run cold. "Hegemony Battle Group," Kira announced, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the threat. 2 heavy cruisers, 8 destroyers, and at least 40 fighters. They dropped out of hyperspace 20 minutes ago and are demanding our surrender." Marcus studied the tactical display with growing dread. This wasn't a pirate raid or a simple smash-and-grab operation. This was a full military assault designed to capture the Academy and everything in it. "Including him. Have they made any specific demands?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Complete surrender of all Academy personnel," Elder Yuki reported from her station. "Immediate transfer of the Den Father to Hegemony custody, and full access to our training databases and combat techniques." "In other words, they want to turn us into their personal army," Kira said, her silver fur bristling with rage. "With you as the leash they use to control us." Marcus felt the familiar surge of protective fury, but this time it was tempered by cold tactical analysis. The Academy's defenses were formidable, but they were designed to repel raiders and pirates, not a full battle group. Against this kind of force, they were hopelessly outmatched. "What about evacuation?" he asked. "Can we get the students to safety?" "Where?" Elder Yuki's ancient voice carried bitter resignation. "The Hegemony controls 3/4 of this sector. There's nowhere to run that they can't follow." As if to emphasize the point, the Academy's shields flared as the first bombardment began. The great tree that housed their command center swayed slightly, its living walls groaning under the impact of military-grade plasma cannons. "Defensive positions," Marcus ordered, falling back on his training. "All students to emergency shelters. Combat teams to—" "No." The voice that interrupted him was soft but carried absolute authority. Marcus turned to see Zara, the young fox girl who had tried to hunt down Dr. Chen, standing in the doorway with a group of her classmates behind her. "Zara, you should be in the shelters with the other students. With respect." "Den Father," she said, her golden eyes blazing with determination. "We're not children anymore. We're warriors, and this is our home. We won't hide while you fight for us. Behind her, Marcus could see dozens of other students nodding in agreement. Young faces set with adult resolve, hands already reaching for weapons. They were prepared to die rather than abandon their den-father and their home. "This isn't your fight," Marcus said desperately. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, we do," another voice said. Senna, the auburn-furred student who had become one of his most trusted pupils, stepped forward. "You taught us that family protects family. We're your family and you're ours. We fight together or we die together." Marcus felt his heart breaking and swelling with pride at the same time. These young warriors, barely out of adolescence, were prepared to face certain death because of their loyalty to him. The weight of that devotion was almost unbearable. "Then we make them pay for every meter," he said finally, accepting what he couldn't change. "If we're going to lose, we'll lose with such ferocity that the galaxy will remember the Academy of the Lupine Claws for 1,000 years. The battle that followed was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. The Vulpine fought with a fury that bordered on supernatural, their pack instincts allowing them to coordinate attacks that no conventional force could have managed. They turned the Academy's corridors into killing fields, using their intimate knowledge of the terrain to ambush and destroy boarding parties piece by piece. Marcus found himself at the center of it all, his presence turning scattered defensive actions into coordinated resistance. Where he appeared, the Fox girls fought with doubled intensity, their devotion to him translating into combat effectiveness that defied all tactical logic. But it wasn't enough. For every hegemony soldier they killed, 2 more took their place. Slowly, inexorably, they were being pushed back toward the Academy's heart. Students fell defending positions that couldn't be held. Instructors died buying time for evacuations that had nowhere to go. Marcus was coordinating the defense of the main courtyard when he saw Piper go down. The young Fox girl had been manning a heavy weapons emplacement when a hegemony rocket found its mark. Marcus watched in horror as the explosion threw her small body across the courtyard like a broken doll. "Piper!" He abandoned his command post and rushed to her side, cradling her broken form as medics raced to help. Her orange fur was matted with blood and her breathing came in shallow gasps. Did I do good, Den-Father?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the sound of battle. "You did perfect," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." Piper smiled, and for a moment her eyes focused on his face with perfect clarity. "I love you, Papa," she said, using the Vulpine word for father. Then her breathing stopped, and Marcus felt something fundamental break inside his chest. The grief that followed was transcendent, a rage so pure and focused that it seemed to bend reality around it. Marcus laid Piper's body gently on the ground and stood up, drawing his sidearm with movements that were perfectly controlled and utterly deadly. "All units," he broadcast on the tactical channel, his voice carrying an authority that made every Vulpine in the Academy stop what they were doing and listen. "Fall back to secondary positions. I'm ending this." "Marcus, what are you doing?" Kira's voice crackled through his comm unit. "What I should have done from the beginning," he replied, walking toward the main entrance where hegemony troops were pouring through breached defenses. "I'm protecting my family. What happened next would become legend among the Vulpine for generations to come." Marcus Chen, the reluctant Den-Father, walked into the teeth of an entire battle group with nothing but a sidearm and the fury of a parent whose child had been murdered. He didn't fight like a human. He fought like something primal and terrible, using tactics that no military academy had ever taught. He turned the hegemony's strength against them, using their formations and protocols to create chaos in their ranks. When his ammunition ran out, he took weapons from fallen enemies. When those broke, he used improvised explosives and environmental hazards, but most importantly, he used his voice. Every command he gave was broadcast on open channels, letting the hegemony forces hear him coordinating the defense. More than that, letting them hear the absolute devotion in the voices that responded to him. "This is what you're fighting," he told them, as Vulpine warriors rallied to his position with suicidal courage. "These are my children, my pack, my family, and I will see every one of you dead before I let you harm another one of them." The psychological effect was devastating. The hegemony forces had expected to face a military school, not a religious movement led by a prophet of war. The fanatical devotion of the Vulpine, their willingness to die for their Den-Father, shook the enemy morale in ways that no amount of firepower could have managed. When the hegemony commander finally called for withdrawal, His forces had taken 80% casualties in exchange for capturing perhaps a tenth of the academy. The cost had been too high, the prize not worth the price. As the enemy ships retreated into hyperspace, Marcus stood in the ruins of the main courtyard, surrounded by the bodies of students who had died believing in him. The victory felt hollow, tainted by the price they had paid for it. "It's over," Kira said, approaching him with careful steps. Her silver fur was singed and blood-stained, and one arm hung useless at her side. "Is it?" Marcus asked, his voice empty. "They'll be back, with more ships, more soldiers, and next time, they'll know what they're facing. Then we'll be ready for them," Elder Yuki said, her ancient voice carrying unshakable conviction, "because we have something they can never understand or defeat. We have love, and loyalty, and a den father who would die for his pack." Marcus looked around at the surviving students and instructors, seeing the absolute faith in their eyes despite everything they had lost. They still believed in him, still trusted him to lead them through whatever darkness lay ahead. "Then we'd better start preparing," he said finally, feeling the weight of leadership settle on his shoulders once more, "because this war is far from over." 2 years after the hegemony's failed assault, the Academy had become something unprecedented in galactic history. What had once been a simple combat school was now the headquarters of the Free Vulpine Alliance, a growing coalition of worlds that had united under the banner of the Den Father and his pack. Marcus stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed command center, watching as ships from a dozen different systems moved through the orbital defense grid. Vulpine warships flew alongside human cruisers, Andromedan fighters, and even a few converted merchant vessels crewed by refugees from hegemony-controlled space. "The Council of Worlds has agreed to our proposal," Kira reported, joining him at the viewing port. Her arm had healed completely, though she still bore the scars of that terrible battle. "Full recognition of the Alliance as a sovereign entity, with voting rights in the Galactic Senate." Marcus nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "And the price?" 3 regiments of Vulpine warriors for the Rim campaign," Kira replied, "plus training assistance for colonial militias and access to our tactical databases." It was the same bargain the hegemony had tried to take by force, offered now as a diplomatic arrangement. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus, but he had learned to accept the realities of galactic politics. The Alliance needed legitimacy more than it needed ideological purity. "At least this time they're asking instead of demanding," he said, "and our people will be fighting for their own freedom, not someone else's empire." The sound of running feet interrupted their conversation. Young Zara, now a full lieutenant and one of Marcus's most trusted officers, burst onto the observation deck with news written across her face. "Den Father," she panted, still breathing hard from her sprint through the Academy's corridors. "Long-range sensors have detected a massive fleet movement in the core worlds. The hegemony is mobilizing everything they have." Marcus felt his blood chill.
"How massive?"
"Over 200 ships," Zara replied, "including at least 6 super dreadnoughts. Intelligence suggests they're planning a final push to eliminate the Alliance before we can consolidate our gains." The numbers were staggering. Even with all their allies, the Free Vulpine Alliance could barely field 50 capital ships. Against the force Zara described, they would be hopelessly outmatched in a conventional battle. "Estimated time to arrival?" Marcus asked, his mind already racing through possibilities. 4 days, assuming they take the direct route through the Vega Nebula." Marcus turned away from the viewing port, his expression grim with determination. "Signal all Alliance ships to converge on the Academy. I want every captain and commander here for an emergency council in 6 hours." As Zara rushed off to relay his orders, Kira moved to stand beside him. "You have a plan," she said. It wasn't a question. "The beginning of one," Marcus admitted. "But it's going to require something we've never attempted before, something that might cost us everything." The council that convened 6 hours later was unlike any military gathering in galactic history. Human admirals sat beside Vulpine pack leaders, while Andromedan hive speakers shared tactical data with refugee captains whose only qualification was their hatred of the hegemony. It should have been chaos, but Marcus's presence held them together like gravity binding a solar system. "The enemy has us outnumbered 4-1, Marcus began, his voice carrying to every corner of the great chamber. "In a conventional battle, we would be annihilated in the first hour. So we're not going to fight a conventional battle." He activated the holographic display, showing the Academy's star system and the surrounding region. The hegemony expects us to either run or make a desperate last stand. Instead, we're going to do something they won't anticipate. We're going to scatter. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the assembled officers. Admiral Richardson, the highest-ranking human in the Alliance, leaned forward in his chair. Scatter? That sounds suspiciously like retreat, Colonel. Not retreat, Marcus corrected. Dispersion. Every ship in this fleet is going to take a different course, spreading out across 100 light-years. The hegemony will have to divide their forces to pursue us, breaking up their overwhelming advantage. And then what? Asked Captain Sora, a Vulpine pack leader whose ship had been one of the first to join the Alliance. We can't run forever. Marcus smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression that made even the battle-hardened officers shift uncomfortably. We don't run forever. We let them chase us for exactly 72 hours. Then when they're spread thin across half the sector, we turn around and hunt them. The plan that unfolded over the next several hours was audacious to the point of madness. Instead of concentrating their forces for a single decisive battle, the Alliance would fragment into dozens of small task forces, each one fast enough to outrun pursuit, but powerful enough to destroy isolated enemy units. You're talking about guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale, Admiral Richardson observed. The logistics alone will be handled by the pack network, Elder Yuki interjected from her position at the council table. Her ancient eyes glittered with fierce approval. Every Vulpine ship in the fleet is connected by bonds deeper than mere communication. They will know where their packmates are, what they need, when to strike and when to fade away. Marcus nodded. The hegemony's strength is their organization, their ability to coordinate massive fleets. But that same organization makes them predictable. They'll follow their doctrine, stick to their formations, try to bring overwhelming force to bear on what they think is our main body. Which will actually be where? Captain Sora asked. Everywhere and nowhere, Marcus replied. Because there won't be a main body, there will only be the pack, hunting as our ancestors hunted on worlds that never knew the light of these stars. The dispersal began immediately. Within hours, the orbital space around the Academy was empty, except for a few decoy signals and a skeleton defense force. The real fleet had vanished into hyperspace, scattering along vectors that would take them to predetermined rally points throughout the sector. Marcus found himself aboard the Fierce Daughter, Kira's command ship, leading a task force of 6 vessels toward the outer rim of the system. As they dropped out of hyperspace near a barren asteroid field, he felt the familiar sensation of pack awareness settle over him like a comfortable cloak. Through bonds he didn't fully understand, he could sense the other task forces taking their positions. Zara's group had reached the industrial moons of Kepler-7. Senna's ships were hiding in the shadow of a gas giant's rings. Throughout the sector, 43 separate units waited like hunters in the tall grass. Hegemony fleet has arrived, reported Lieutenant Torres from the sensor station. They're moving in standard formation toward the Academy's last known position. Marcus watched the tactical display as over 200 enemy ships advanced like a steel avalanche. For a moment, doubt crept into his mind. What if he was wrong? What if the hegemony commander was smarter than he'd assumed? What if this grand gamble cost not only his own life, but the lives of everyone who had trusted him? Then he felt it, the touch of pack consciousness that had become as natural as breathing. Thousands of Vulpine warriors spread across the sector, all of them connected to him and through him to each other. Their absolute faith in his leadership washed away his doubts like a tide erasing footprints from sand. All units, he broadcast on the encrypted pack channel. Commence Operation Wolfpack. The hegemony fleet discovered their mistake when they reached the Academy's coordinates and found nothing but empty space and sensor ghosts. By then it was too late. Alliance task forces had already begun their attacks, striking at isolated patrol ships and supply convoys with devastating effectiveness. The battle that followed wasn't really a battle at all. It was a hunt that lasted for 6 days and covered half the sector. Hegemony ships that tried to group up found themselves harassed by lightning raids that melted away before they could respond. Units that spread out to search were overwhelmed by concentrated Alliance attacks that struck from multiple directions simultaneously. Marcus coordinated it all from the bridge of the Fierce Daughter. His consciousness expanded across the pack network until he could perceive the entire battlefield, as if from a godlike perspective. He felt every victory and every loss, shared the triumph of successful ambushes and the grief of fallen packmates. On the 4th day, the hegemony commander made his fatal mistake. Frustrated by his inability to bring the alliance to battle, he divided his remaining forces into 3 massive fleets and sent them racing toward what his intelligence suggested were alliance strongholds. It was exactly what Marcus had been waiting for. All units converge. On Rally Point 7, he commanded. Feeling the pack respond to his will like an extension of his own body. Time to end this. The final engagement took place in the shadow of a dying star, its red light painting the hulls of both fleets in shades of blood and fire. The hegemony's first fleet, still numbering over 60 ships, found itself facing what appeared to be the remnants of the alliance force. They charged forward eagerly, anticipating an easy victory. Instead, they flew into a trap that had been 3 days in the making.